Well, Peter Beattie is no stranger to an election campaign. The former Queensland Premier enjoyed sweeping victories in 3 state elections, which set him up as one of the most electorally successful politicians in Australian history. But his luck may be about to end. He only needs a swing of 1.6% to win the seat of Ford, but that's looking increasingly unlikely. And if the polls are anything to go by, his political popularity in Queensland isn't correlating into votes for Labor on September 7. Peter Beattie joins us from Brisbane today, and our panel, Deputy Editor of the Sunday Telegraph Clare Harvey and News Corp Australia's political writer Steve Lewis. Good morning to you all.
Morning, Kath.
Morning.
Mr Beattie, if I could begin with you, should Kevin Rudd have flown to Brisbane to film this cooking show, or should he have gone straight to Canberra to deal with Syria?
Kath, I've seen some political beat-ups in my time, and this has got to be in the top 10. The reality is the national security agencies couldn't brief him until last night. Now, he had a commitment to do this with the ABC. If he couldn't be briefed until last night, what was he going to do? Sit on the tarmac and twiddle his thumbs? I mean, you know, I just think sometimes in election campaigns we nitpick and nitpick and nitpick. I mean, give him a go. All I'm saying, Kath, is this. The show was agreed. He couldn't be briefed until last night. That's a fact. And frankly, I think we should move on. If this is the best thing we can talk about in an election campaign, I think we should all grow up.
But isn't the point, Mr Beattie, that Mr Rudd is making a big fuss about this? Mr Rudd is accusing my newspaper of misrepresenting him. In fact, what happened is that Mr Rudd's staff briefed out that Mr Rudd was suspending the campaign to deal with Syria. What actually happened was that he flew back to Brisbane on a taxpayer-funded jet to film a TV cooking show. There's no problem with filming a TV cooking show, is there? Isn't it the fact that he wasn't honest about it in the first place?
Well, Claire, the problem was he couldn't be briefed until last night. And frankly, what was he going to do in the meantime? And in terms of the taxpayers' jet, of course, you know, Tony Abbott's got one too. That's what happens in an election campaign. My point's simple, Claire. If he couldn't be briefed until last night, and that was the advice from the national security agencies, well, then frankly, he didn't need to get to Canberra until last night. We have to remember this is important. We are a member of the Security Council. People being, you know, bombed in the way they were, the use of gas, all that is important. So, Claire, all I'm saying is I think it's a beat-up. With all due respect, I think it's a beat-up. I think he should have done the show and he should have been briefed when he could be briefed.
But, Mr Beattie, we have seen over the last week from the debate with the question marks about his behaviour with the makeup artist, and now this question about whether he should have gone straight to Canberra, whether he should have been more honest with the journalist travelling with him. Is there not a danger that this reminds voters that of the Kevin Rudd of old?
Oh, look, Steve, I think all this publicity hasn't done him any good. But is it fair? Well, that's a matter for the Australian people to judge. I just would hope that we could focus on the real issues in this campaign, because in 5 years' time, when we're looking at the level of unemployment, we're looking at where the economy is going, we're looking at the $5 billion a year, which Mr Abbott is spending on parental leave, they'll be the things affecting Australia and the Australian economy. All this will be forgotten. Well, I'm just... Sorry, Steve, you go.
No. Well, let's talk about the polls. Let's talk about the home ground advantage that Kevin Rudd and you were supposed to bring to the state of Queensland and help Labor win 6 to 8 seats. That looks as though that's not going to occur. What is the problem in Queensland? What is the problem with the Labor brand in Queensland that you appear to be struggling in Ford and that other Labor candidates seem to be struggling?
Steve, the polls are not good, and that's self-evident, and I won't deny that. I've got an uphill battle in Ford. The Labor Party's got an uphill battle in Queensland. We have an uphill battle in the federal campaign. No doubt about that at all. But you have to remember, we've got 2 weeks to go. I actually launched my campaign today. Kevin Rudd's a fighter, and so am I. I've been in worse positions than this in the past, particularly in 2001, and gone on and won an election. We'll be saying to Queenslanders, Steve, and to Australians, but particularly to Queenslanders, 2 things. One, if you have a look at Tony Abbott's parental leave costing you $5 billion a year, $5 billion a year for people up to $150,000 on income, and they'll get $75,000 when poor old pensioners on $19,000 in their generation never got it. I think people will start to think about it. The second thing that'll impact in Queensland is this. We've got Tony Abbott obviously out there boosting the Indonesian boat building industry by putting money to buy boats off Indonesians to try and prevent so-called people smugglers. I mean, people smugglers have got to be having the greatest celebrations in Indonesia. I mean, I don't know why Tony Abbott's out supporting the Indonesian boat building industry. The other thing is this. Look, I've never been sensitive to press criticism in my life. But I do think in Queensland the Courier Mail should actually give Kevin a fair go. I think he's been beaten from one post to the other. I've always believed if you're ugly enough, you cop it. But I think the Courier's just gone a little too far. And I just say to the Courier, come on, we've 2 weeks to go, give him a go.
Isn't the Courier and the Sunday Mail, though, just representing what the voters are saying to you? I mean, you must be hearing the same things from people in Queensland. You're a very popular man. People like you. They must be telling you, frankly, that the heartache that Labor has put itself through over the past few years have hurt the Labor brand in Queensland, surely.
Oh, Claire, certainly there's a percentage of that. Look, with me, what you see is what you get. I don't deny the truth in any circumstances. Of course there are people saying that to me. But wherever I go, I'm also getting people saying to me, $5 billion for parental scheme for the wealthy, a gold-edged scheme, I get that. I'm getting people saying to me, look, hang on, why are we buying Indonesian boats? This has got 2 weeks to go. Yes, we're up against it. This is the biggest fight of my political life in Ford, going back to Steve's question. And Claire, this is a big fight for the Labor Party to make the comeback. But we're up to it, and we're determined to actually do it. All I'm simply saying is give us a fair go for the next 2 weeks.
Mr. Beattie, let's talk about trust, because so much of what we need in our politicians, we need to trust our politicians. You all ask that of us, of yourselves. But from a man who said back in 2011, Kevin Rudd has a propensity for destruction, no one should forget the damage that Kevin Rudd has done. These are your words. So if you've done a backflip on the way you feel about Kevin Rudd, how are voters expected to trust whatever else you say?
Oh, look, Kath, it's no secret that Kevin and I haven't always agreed. That's on the public record. I've written about it, I've spoken about it, don't deny it. We've had our differences. But we're also big enough and ugly enough to actually put those aside and say, what is good policies for Australia? What's good for Queensland? Now, frankly, people out there in the community, Kath, are sick to death of politicians fighting and scratching one another's eyes out. They want people to work together. What Kevin Rudd and I have demonstrated is we're prepared to put the past behind us, put Australia first, and work together. But I think that's a good thing.
Mr. Beattie, Labor's campaign, particularly over the last week, has been characterised by an unrelenting attack on Tony Abbott, on the Coalition's paid parental leave scheme. We're not seeing a lot of positive policies coming out from the Labor Party.
Oh, look, Steve, two things about that. Yes, you're right. Of course the Labor Party has attacked Tony Abbott's parental leave scheme, and why wouldn't we? $5 billion a year. Even the rollout for the NBN is only $2 billion a year, but $5 billion a year for people up to $150,000 of income. I just think that is something that's not good for Australia, and I don't think it's fair. It's just unfair. So all I'm simply saying is I think that's legitimate criticism of the other side's policies. You're right. We have to continue to put out positive policies. We're trying to do that. I mean, Kevin's, I think, long-term strategy about dealing with Australia post-China, the boom, that's where Australia has to go because, frankly, we won't be getting jobs in manufacturing. We won't be getting jobs in the areas we need unless we're smart enough to think post the mining boom. And Kevin's the only leader who's talking about that.
OK, Mr. Beattie, I'm afraid we have to take a break right now, but stay with us. We will have more with Peter Beattie after the break.